Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the CROSSWORD CYBERSECURITY PLC Interim Accounts Update. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard. I'd also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll. I would now like to hand you over to Tom Ilube, CEO, Mary Dowd, CFO, Sean Arrowsmith, Group Sales Director, and Stuart Jubb, Managing Director of CROSSWORD CYBERSECURITY PLC. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this morning. Just to introduce you to the presentation team, some of you will know us. I'm Tom Ilube. I'm founder and chief exec of CROSSWORD. As some of you will know, I'm also a non-exec director at the BBC and have been a technology entrepreneur for a number of years now with various different companies. Mary is our finance director, was previously chief operating officer and chief financial officer for Cordium Group, an international governance, risk and compliance company. Stuart is managing director of our consulting business. He was formerly associate director at KPMG and chief operating officer of a global consulting team at KPMG, following a career in the armed forces. And Sean Arrowsmith joined us earlier this year, has 20 years of sales experience in cybersecurity, was previously group sales director at IRM Limited, that was eventually sold to Altran. Okay, so that's the presentation team. And just to remind you, CROSSWORD is a British cybersecurity commercialization company. We work with universities to commercialize their intellectual property and into products and services. And what we're doing is building a portfolio of recurring revenue products. We are an IP-based company looking for ideas out of universities, turning them into cybersecurity products that we then take to market. And the market that we're particularly interested in are commercial companies. We are not selling cybersecurity products to consumers, and we ourselves don't have a big focus on selling into government, although we do sell to government with partners, as you'll hear about. But we focus on commercial companies, and our intellectual property based business around products is supported by a strong and rapidly growing consulting business that also has a large proportion and a growing proportion of recurring revenue as well. So the key to what we're doing is building a recurring revenue business. I will take you through the executive summary, and then I'll hand over to other members of the team to take you through some of the details. So overall, how has the first half of the year gone? Well, for all of us, it's been a very tough year, as I'm sure all of you will have found as well. It's been a tough year on the business front, on the team side, particularly on the well-being side. We've put a lot of work into making sure that individual members of the team are in good shape. But despite all of that, we feel we've done pretty well for what the first half of 2020 has been like. Overall, total revenue for the group has increased by 18% in the first half of the year versus the first half of 2019. And within that, product and consulting revenue has increased by 43% versus the first half of the year. Risk and assurance, we're seeing continued traction with that product, and Sean will talk a bit more about that as we go on. We've seen some notable client wins, and overall risk and assurance orders were up 41% in the first half of the year versus the same period the previous year. We also launched Risiken Pro, which is aimed at smaller and medium-sized companies, and we launched that in July. And what that is doing is transforming the sales model for Risiken. When Sean came in as our new group sales director, he and I had a good look at the way Risiken sales were working, and what we concluded was, and something that we've been thinking about to some extent anyway, was that the sales cycle for the bigger ticket Risican assurance sales is long. It's typically between 6 and 18 months, depending on who the client is. And we felt that as well as continuing to work on those long sales cycles, we needed a much quicker turnaround version of Risican. And that led to the creation of Risican Pro, a more limited version of Risican, still fully functional, but limited in various ways, that's really focused on small and medium-sized enterprises and is more modular in its approach. And that's resulted in the sales cycle for that product shrinking really significantly. We've seen sales happen in 4 to 12 weeks rather than the 6 to 18 months of the full Risican product. The other thing that we're seeing that Sean will talk about is an impressively high conversion rate from getting clients into trials to them committing to take the product. And at the moment, it's still early days for Risican Pro. As I said, we only launched it in July, but we're seeing about 50% conversion from clients going into trials with Risican Pro to committing to take the product. And I'm sure that will go down as the volume increases, but that's a very, very promising start, we think. We signed an additional reseller, Satisnet, a leading IT security reseller who will be taking our product Risican Pro into their customer base. They have of the order of about 2,000 commercial clients that they sell into. They sell a range of IT security products into that client base, and they'll now be selling Risican into that client base as well. And so Satisnet come alongside our other partners, Leonardo, the global defense contractor, and NCC, the leading cybersecurity provider. And what our approach to partnerships is to have a limited number of significant partners that can have a material impact rather than a large number of small partners. So with Satisnet, Leonardo, NCC as our main partners that we focus time and attention on, we believe that our partner go-to-market strategy will have an impact on the business over the coming months and years. Consulting has been growing well. It's extended its recurring revenue vCISO service, the Virtual Chief Information Security Officer service. Stuart will say a bit more about that later. And it's been gaining particular traction in various sectors. We've had some good client wins in the insurance industry and other sectors on the consulting side. Our second product, Nixa, is now out in the market. We did a lot of work with Imperial College at the back end of last year, and I'll say a bit more about where we're up to with Nixa. And as some of you will know, we raised an additional £1 million in equity in April 2020 at £2.30 per share. On the operational side, a few main things in the first half of the year. Sean, as I mentioned, joined us. The reason why we were attracted to getting Sean on board is that in his previous company, he was the sales director that came in when the company was turning over about 2 million a year, and his sales team and him driving it grew it to turn over about 10 million a year in the cybersecurity sector, with a mix of both product and services. And essentially, we are at that same stage of wanting to go through that growth period. And we've got someone with Sean who has done exactly that job successfully in the past. Previously, we had one individual who, Jake Holloway, who was both product and sales director. And at the end of last year, we decided to separate those roles so that Jake could focus fully on the product role, allowing Sean, who's come in, to focus on the sales role. Dr. Robert Coles, who took on the role of non-executive chair of CrossWORD Consulting Limited. Robert was previously, earlier in his career, a KPMG partner, and in fact established KPMG's information security consulting division. So he really knows how to build that sort of business, and him and Stuart are working closely together to build up that side of the business. And we've been raising our profile across the PR front with a series of webinars and also a lot more digital marketing campaign activity as well. COVID has hit everyone, as you know. The way that it's hit us, certain sectors have been quite hard hit. So obviously travel, leisure, hospitality, very hard hit. We had opportunities in the pipeline in those sectors. Those opportunities pretty much fell out of the pipeline straight away. We had other opportunities where work had been signed off but didn't start because people were being sent home. Companies weren't sure what they were doing. So we saw some delays during March, April, May, as people adjusted to working from home. That has eased up to quite an extent now, but we definitely saw that impact in Q2 in particular. It interestingly was starting to be easier to get sales meetings. You could get hold of people, and when you did get hold of people, they were willing to take a Zoom call or have a phone call and so forth because they were at home and they didn't have to juggle diaries in quite the same way. So it was relatively easy to keep the momentum of sales meetings going on, but decisions weren't being made. Decisions were being pushed up the tree. Everything was slightly on hold for a while during that sort of main national lockdown period. From a cybersecurity point of view, we did see a lot of companies thinking about their changes in working practices, such as remote working, and the fact that this introduced a heightened risk of cybersecurity. So there were definitely aspects of cybersecurity that were not discretionary, and companies were continuing to spend. There were other aspects where companies were saying, actually, that's a bit more at the new end of things. We don't feel we need to do that at the moment. COVID and Brexit has highlighted issues to do with the supply chain. People found during the COVID period their normal suppliers were having challenges, and they've had a look at their supply chain again. With Brexit coming up, people are thinking about their supply chains. So there's a lot of conversation about the supply chain and about risks to the supply chain, and some of the recent cybersecurity breaches that Stuart will talk about in a moment have been attacks to the supply chain. That is actually good for us in the sense that Risicon specifically focuses on supply chain risk. For CROSSWORD ourselves, we obviously went through the process of closing offices and having people working at home and so forth, and that worked very smoothly. We're a tech company, we're quite used to that. We have to work a lot on people's mental health and well-being, and just making sure that the teams are managed appropriately during this period. We have managed to reduce quite a lot of cost in the first half of the year. We had a number of people on furlough and have made several redundancies as furlough came to an end. We still have a couple of people on furlough who we hope to bring back as business picks up on the consulting side. All the non-execs and advisors agreed to suspend their fees for 6 months as COVID hit. All the execs took salary reductions for 6 months as COVID hit. All the execs took a 25% salary reduction for 6 months, and I, as chief executive, took a 50% salary reduction. And we reduced other overheads, and other members of staff reduced hours. So overall, we were able to reduce cash outgoing during that period. And my experience of working your way through this sort of period is that cash really does become king, and where you can keep cash in the bank and stretch out your runway, then that's a smart thing to do, and that's what we did earlier on in the year. So the outlook for 2020 as a whole, we are confident as a team that we will deliver full year revenue growth of at least 25%. And we can see most of that, and we can see where it's coming from. We also, in addition to that, have several large bid opportunities that are out there at the moment. And these aren't sort of prospects in the pipeline. These are actual bids that have gone into the client and we're waiting for decisions. There are 2 multi-million-pound bids that are sitting with clients waiting for decisions at the moment. There are several at the six-figure level, and those decisions, all of them, well, most of them certainly, should be made this side of Christmas. Those could obviously have an impact on our revenue for the year, but the 25% that we're saying doesn't include those bids. So even if we lost all of those bids, we would still hit that 25% revenue growth for the year. If we win one or more of those bids, then there'll be upside on that. And in fact, we'll come on to them again later, but two of the bids there are really quite material. And if we did win either of them, they would be quite transformational for the business. Product and consulting revenue within that 25%, product and consulting revenue, we expect and we're aiming to grow by at least 35% for the year, because what we're doing is we're doing slightly less of the software development work that we were doing in previous years. We're bringing that down and we're increasing the product and consulting work. And as well as growing organically, we're keeping our eye open for interesting acquisition opportunities. One of the things we've found through this period, COVID period, is that there are some companies out there that perhaps are performing less well, not so much through any fault of their own, and there may be interesting opportunities to get involved with acquisitions, and we'll keep an eye on that, both on the product side and on the consulting side as well. So we'll look at those opportunities as and when they come up. I'll now ask Mary to just cover the financial highlights.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everybody. So we released our half-year results on Monday this week, and we announced our revenue in the first half of 2020 of £674,000. This was up 18% from £571,000 in the first 6 months of 2019. Within that, product and consulting revenue grew by 43% over the prior period, as we stepped away from software development revenue, which fell by 35%. In the first 6 months, orders received for risk and assurance were up by 41% on the prior period in the prior year, and the number of risk and opportunities in the pipeline continued to grow. The total comprehensive loss for the period was almost 1.4 million, and this was an increase of almost 316k over the same period in the prior year. Behind that number, overheads increased by 304k, and some of the drivers for that were, as Tom mentioned, Sean Arrowsmith joined in January, so we had his costs for the first half of the year, and also the associated recruitment costs with Sean coming on board. We issued 1.4 million of convertible loan notes in December 2019. So in the first half of this year, we had the interest associated with those loans, almost 100,000. And also we had a share-based payment variance on last year of almost 30k. And this was as a result of consulting staff in the first half of 2019 coming off the consulting share option plan and moving to the PLC option plan. So there was a credit in the period in 2019. Cash at the end of June was just over 1.5 million, and at the end of August it was 1.3 million. I'm going to hand over to Stuart now to talk about the opportunity in cybersecurity.
Thanks, Mary, and good morning, everyone. So the high-profile data breaches on this slide highlight that the cyber problem is not going away. And it's interesting that with Marriott, that both breaches were through third parties, with the last one through a software supplier. The supply chain remains a key risk to companies that hackers will look to exploit. Hackers are also looking to exploit shared working tools like Zoom and some of the infrastructure needed to allow people to work from home, as Tom mentioned. And hackers have also adapted the types of attacks that they target people with, taking advantage of COVID and the general uncertainty. A more disparate workforce increases the attack surface and also increases employees' vulnerability to attacks. And the last trend we're seeing is that companies have also accelerated their digital transformation over the past 6 months. And as they become more reliant on third-party technology, they'll need to adapt their cyber posture, and this will be good for companies like CrossWord. As Tom mentioned, although some companies have reduced discretionary spending, companies will still need to spend money to keep the lights on, so to speak. So these positive trends will have positive implications for future cyber spending. Back to you, Tom.
Great, thanks. So just to remind people and update those that don't know, we have a very strong leadership team. Sir Richard Dearlove is chair of the company. As you'll know, he was the former head of MI6 and is currently chair, amongst other things, of trustees at the University of London. So has a really good overlap between the security world and the academic and research world. And is obviously very, very well connected and is happy to introduce us and where we need to be introduced. I continue to be chief executive of the company. We have a strong advisory board. Dr. Robert Coles chairs it, along with Professor Nick Jennings, General Sir Nick Houghton, and Una May O'Reilly. I should just stress there, and in fact, in response to one of the questions that's been asked, that we don't pay large fees to this advisory board. They are very helpful to us. It is a very modest amount of money for such a senior board, and they are incredibly helpful and well connected, and we get full value out of working with them. I've talked about Sean Arrowsmith as our Group Sales Director, and Stuart as our Managing Director for the consulting business. Our product set at the moment, Risiken is our main product that's out there, enterprise class third-party risk assurance. It originated from research at City, University of London, that developed into a product, and we're now in the market with. Nixa is our next product. It's a machine learning based application protection product that I'll say a bit more about in a moment. You've heard about the consulting business, and you'll hear more about that as Stuart updates on it. We created two companies along with universities over the last few years. CyberOwl was created out of Coventry University, an intrusion early warning detection system, and we have an equity stake in CyberOwl, and in past years have been doing development work for them. And BizGen was created out of ideas that came out of Warwick University and EPFL in Switzerland. That is a blockchain focused platform, and we do development work for them and also have a commercial deal with BizGen. Sean, over to you.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk about Risiken. So just really to set the context about where Risiken has come from, you would have heard Stuart already referring to supplier assurance and supply chain risk being a real reality for organizations still, the Marriott breach being an example of that. So Risiken was designed and built to address supplier assurance within organizations, because typically what we were seeing, even in large complex enterprises, was that people were still undertaking supplier assurance using a manual process. So they were building big questionnaires in spreadsheets, sending them out over email, getting responses, and it becoming unwieldy and unscalable. And therefore, there was a need for automation and digitalization of that process. So Risiken Enterprise was built really to address large organizations with large complex supply chains. And the route to market that we were using for sales of that was a fairly traditional outbound sales model, identifying targets and making contact to establish need, and then going through quite a lengthy sales cycle, which would typically be somewhere between 6 to 18 months. So we got thinking, how can we really accelerate and rapidly speed up our customer acquisition process by taking a different offer to the market? So we created Risiken Pro was really designed to speed up the sales process, but also to address the SME market, so we could open up a new segment to aim at. To do that, we created a fully self-service sign-in, so you can literally go onto the Risiken website, you can put in your details, you can drop straight into a trial, You can enter in credit card payment on that process, and it's a completely frictionless sales process and much quicker than the previous route to market that we've been doing with Risiken Enterprise. We've also introduced the ability to go into a 30-day free trial, which also drives the decision-making process quicker, because we can guide people into the trial process, and at the end of that trial, they have to make the yes or no decision, within a certain time frame. So that brings down the sales cycle. And also, rather than just relying on a traditional outbound, telephone-based and email-based reach out into the market to identify opportunities, we've also invested in inbound digital marketing campaigns to bring as much traffic and business into free trials as possible. And what we're seeing so far, which is really encouraging, is that in the free trial process, we're finding that when we get the product into the hands of people to look at it, we have a really, really high conversion rate so far of about 50%. We recognize as we put more volume into the top of the funnel in terms of Risiken Pro, that conversion rate is likely to come down a bit. But as an early indicator, that's really, really encouraging for us. And considering we launched, at the end of July, going into August, we're very encouraged by that. To give you an example, we had one client or new client who we established contact with through marketing activity, and within 30 days they were signed up as new customers. So that kind of rhythm is exactly what we're after with Risiken Pro in terms of accelerating customer acquisition. The other thing we thought about and we've talked about is how can we get Risiken Pro into the hands of larger audiences and as many people as possible, because we recognize that the more people that get to see it and use the product, the more we will convert into paying customers. So we've launched an initiative where we are approaching membership bodies, and those are professional membership bodies and business bodies within the UK with large memberships, where we can offer a version of Risiken Pro for them to use on a free basis, but with the view that we'll then encourage them to convert into paying customers to use the wider functionality of Risiken Pro. And we're embarking on discussions with a number of bodies to really grow that area and get Risiken out there so that we can accelerate that customer acquisition. And then the final pillar with Risiken is where we're working with partners, and this has already been touched upon. We have a number of good partners in Leonardo, the large defense contractor, and we're working with them on a major bid at the moment that's actually submitted to the customer. We're waiting for a result within the next couple of months. It's a tender, so it's a yes or no situation. But they put us in front of 3 to 5 year deals with 6-figure, 7-figure revenue opportunities in that space. And MCC is also leading us into a number of really large scale organizations where they want to deliver services using Risiken as the platform to deliver those services. So the partner element is also really important for us in terms of leveraging their route to market and making sure that we can get in front of some large scale deals that way. This slide is an example of the scorecard within Risiken. So in terms of automation, we will push out assessments into the supply chain. The supplier will complete that assessment, and effectively when that information is fed back up into Risiken, at a click of a button, you can get a top level view of where the risks are in the supply chain in terms of how they've responded to the assessment. So on this example, there's a number of different areas that we've assessed, from modern slavery to GDPR and cybersecurity. But it gives you a really good, quick snapshot of where the risks are. And of course, you can drill down into any of these elements and see the underlying data and responses that have created the red, amber, green status. This is all configurable. The key information, you can include whatever you like in terms of what you want to see. So, you get a really good snapshot view. And the underlying data of this will generate automated reports for, audit purposes and general other reporting purposes. So Risiken's really at quite a high standard now in terms of at a click of a button giving you that snapshot view of where your supply chain risks are with the organizations that you're assessing. We are seeing further traction. These are a number of mainly Risiken Enterprise clients, but some good new wins this year with Nuvia in civil nuclear, Baron McCann in terms of the IT reseller and distribution world. but also Camel Laird, which is a great organisation, shipbuilding and engineering services based up in Merseyside, and that, some great wins early in the year there, but also new wins coming on board through the Risiken Pro launch and the go-to-market that we're doing with those opportunities. And just to summarise, I'm really encouraged by the traction. We looked at the UK market and we looked at the number of organisations out there that we felt would be applicable to needing a solution like Risiken, and then looked at the amount of revenue that could generate, and we see it as a 300 million per annum market as a result of that. And you can see from the clients that we've already spoken about, we're in multiple sectors. We're having discussions with financial services businesses, with manufacturing, with engineering, with healthcare. It's very applicable across a wide range of different sectors because it addresses a risk that every organisation has to look at, which is supply chain risk. With the partner opportunities, as discussed and talked about, this leads us into significant bid situations where we get into multi-million-pound, multi-year contract opportunities in large-scale defence opportunities, for example, and those partners are really critical to get us in those positions and allow us to bid behind them. And then finally, Risiken Pro, as said, we've developed it so we can rapidly scale up and increase our customer acquisition by getting out to a wider audience and doing that quickly and allowing a real seamless and frictionless process in terms of going from trialing into paying customer and just really shortening that sales cycle so we can drive the acquisition of those SME clients at speed.
Great, thanks, Sean. Okay, so our second product, Nixa, we've been working on this for some time, and most recently with Imperial College to refine some of its algorithms. Nixa defends against what are called credential stuffing type of attacks. These are the type of attacks where a hacker or a fraudulent actor is trying primarily to take over your account. And the way that they're going to do that is by collecting up a huge number or buying a huge number of usernames and passwords that have leaked onto the internet or they've stolen from somewhere, and then trying those combinations of usernames and passwords over and over again until they stumble on a combination that opens up your account and then they've taken over your account. That's what is called account takeover. That is happening on an industrial scale. Literally millions and millions of usernames and passwords are being used in order to attack sites like this. And a lot of the stories that you will hear about companies being hacked or people losing money and so forth, actually what's happening is account takeover. One way or another, the hackers have managed to take over. They've managed to get the credentials, i.e. the username and password. They've used those credentials in order to take over the account, and then they can do what they like. They can change the payment details, they can order things, they can access information and so forth. So Nixa defends against that. If we go on to the next slide, Mary. Essentially what it's doing is it's saying what the attack that it's defending against is that there are billions of usernames and passwords out there that are using web proxies and cheap credential attacking tools. Tools like Sniper, Sentry MBA, Storm. These are tools that hackers can get their hands on, and those are being used to take over millions of accounts, and that's what really gives rise to many of the big GDPR fines and other problems that we see. And Nixa uses machine learning in order to defend against that. We've been working on this product for a while. It's a really interesting product that solves a real problem in this area, and we're now out along with our consulting team talking to potential users of the product, companies that want to use it, and in particular companies that want to embed it into their systems, because one of the challenges with machine learning type approaches is that cybersecurity people are quite wary of using black box solutions that they don't know exactly how it works. Whereas with Nixa, they can actually embed Nixa into their code and see exactly what it's doing and how it works. So that's where that is at the moment. And Stuart, I think you're going to talk about consulting.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So consulting's been making good traction over the past couple of years, and we're now becoming a well-recognised brand among top-tier CISOs. We're starting to displace some of the bigger consultancies and a couple of major clients, including a couple of FTSE 250 companies and a large global insurance company. An example of a typical client journey is one where we're working with a major international insurance broker, so another insurance company, where we did a small piece of diagnostic work back in 2019 to really understand what their level of cyber resilience was at that time. And then we embarked on a series of transformation programs to rapidly improve their end-to-end cyber resilience. And as Tom mentioned, one of the key things we're trying to do is to increase the recurring revenue. So as the project work continued, we were able to evolve that into the vCISO contract, which we announced last year and was a six-figure 3-year deal. And we've managed to double the virtual CISO revenue in the first half of the year. So and the pipeline is looking very strong for second half of the year and 2021. We're finding this is a good business model, and we've got several more similar size opportunities in the pipeline with major clients where we're either undergoing current project work or about to start, and we're able to shape those multi-year vCISO engagements as we work through the projects. And as our brand strengthening, we're finding that we're able to move up the value chain from small and medium enterprises into some of the more larger international companies. And clients like the virtual CISO engagement because it gives them access to a full cybersecurity team, because cybersecurity is a multi-skilled discipline, and they're able to get access to the team without the expense of hiring their own full-time team. And we usually find that this leads to additional project-based work on top. And it's a good way of keeping the utilization of our team relatively high, because that's always one of the challenges in a consulting firm. Consulting is strategic to the product business, and we provide we provide consulting support for product sales. So with Risiken, for example, we provide end-to-end third-party assurance consulting, where we can help at each stage of the implementation, and often clients will want to do an element of their own due diligence on companies that they deem a high risk to those companies. And we also provide market intelligence for current and future product development. So with Tom mentioning Nixa, consulting are able to introduce the product team to some of our clients, and they give us immediate feedback on the product, and we're able to then iterate the product a lot quicker. And from a consulting side, clients like it because we're seen as a innovative consultancy, and we're very different from other consultancies who tend to be sort of straightforward sort of consultants on sort of time and materials day rates type contract. We've worked with over 50 clients over the past 4.5 years from multiple sectors, from insurance, professional services, financial services, nuclear and technology, to name but a few. And we recently became a accredited penetration testing team, which is the internationally recognized quality standard in security testing. And again, from a recurring revenue perspective, this is interesting because a lot of the larger companies will use firms on retainers, and they will give them large volumes of recurring work on multi-year deals. And this will give us the opportunity to scale the penetration testing team in addition to our virtual CISO recurring revenue. Back to you, Tom.
I'm going
to Mary, I think you're picking this one up.
Yes, thank you. So I'm just going to provide a summary and overview and then move on to the financial statements. So Tom founded CrossWord in March 2014, and we were admitted to AIM in December 2018. We have 2 offices, one in Richmond in Surrey and one in Krakow in Poland, where our software development team are based. We have a staff of 34, and since inception, we've engaged with more than 40 universities. We launched Risican Enterprise in September 2019, and shortly after that, we engaged with a FTSE 250 chemical company, really validating for us that this is an enterprise product. In July this year, we launched Risican Pro, and in November 2019, we launched Nixer Cyber ML. We've demonstrated strong revenue growth. In 2019, we reported revenue growth of 22%, and we're forecasting revenue growth in this year of 25%. Within that, product and consulting revenue growth was 51% in 2019 and 43% in the first half of this year. Consulting launched its vCISO service and has secured its highest value multi-year contract to date. We raised 1.4 million in convertible debt in December 2019, and we raised 1 million in equity in April 2020 at a price of £2.30 per share. From the 12 months from July 20, we have 950k of revenue in hand. So I'm just going to move on to the P&L. We've already spoken quite a bit about revenue. The cost of sales line includes our software development costs and our consulting staff costs and any third-party costs required to deliver on consulting. I've spoken about the movement in the overheads compared to last year. At the bottom of the P&L, we are now reporting non-controlling interests, as Stuart has acquired 10% of the consulting business as part of his LTIP. The balance sheet, right-to-use assets are our leases. There are no particular numbers of note and variances from either the same period last year or the year-end numbers at December 2019. So I think it's just the cash of just over 1.5 million at the end of June and 1.3 million at the end of August, as I previously stated. Tom, I'm going to hand back to you.
Great. Okay, so I'll just summarize and then we'll get into questions. So where do I feel that we are? I think we have weathered the storm. We've weathered the COVID storm and come through to where we are now, I think, in really pretty good, strong shape. And we're starting to push forward again, and we'll go into next year in very good shape, I think. We grew 18% in the overall in the first half of this year versus last year, and within that, product and consulting revenue was up 43%. Risican has got some very good new deals that it's landed in the first half of the year, and Risican Pro, I think, is a real breakthrough in terms of getting to scale now, with Sean's input coming in and looking at our sales approach, and then coming up with Risican Pro that reduces the sales cycle from sort of 12 to 18 months down to 4 to 12 weeks. That will have a big impact. And also the conversion that we're seeing from trials to commitments of about 50%. Obviously, that's going to go down as we get more people into that funnel. But what that tells us, the challenge there is to get a large number of clients into that funnel and see them converting, hence the sort of conversations we're having with membership bodies, that several of whom literally have tens of thousands of businesses that they provide membership benefits to. And if we can land 1 or 2 of those and they start to provide Risican to those members as a benefit, and then we see them converting, then I think we'll see some really interesting numbers coming out from that side. Alongside that, we have several large deals, 2 of which are multi-million-pound deals, several of which are in the 6 figures. We aren't reliant on those to get to a 25% growth for the year, but if any of those do fall our way over the next few months, that will be quite significant. And as I said, we are comfortable that we will get to 25% top-line growth for 2020 as a whole. So overall, it's been a tough first half for everyone with COVID. Every business out there has had its challenges. We have come through it in good shape. with good growth, a strong team, and we're looking forward to the rest of the year and going into 2021.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tom, Mary, Sean, Stuart. Thank you for updating investors. Ladies and gentlemen, do please continue to submit your question using the Q&A tab situated in the right corner of your screen. Simply type your question and press send. Just while the company take a few moments to review those investor questions submitted already, I'd like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard on the Investor Meet Company platform. Lastly, before I hand back to the CROSSWORD team, I'd like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company. Immediately after the presentation is ended, you will be redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback in order the company can better understand your views and expectations. If I could just ask, before we look at the questions submitted today, we've had a number of pre-submitted questions from investors ahead of today's presentation. If you wouldn't mind, I'll just read these out. If you could ask, some of which you have covered off through the presentation, but if there's just any further colour, if you don't mind, guys.
Yeah.
The first one we've got, you state you're confident of 25% revenue growth. What visibility do you have on this?
Yeah, we have pretty good visibility on that. The reason why we're confident about it is that we can see contracts that we already have either signed or at the sort of 100% level. You know, they're there, just barring getting the purchase order. There's one or two areas where we need to push a bit to just get the revenue up, but more or less, you know, we're pretty clear that we can see how we get to that 25% revenue, and you know, the additional contracts that I've talked about would then give us revenue on top of that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tom. Next one we've got here pre-submitted. Could you outline your sales strategy in the mix of revenue? Again, I think you have touched on this as we went through the presentation, but if there's any further colour you can give, that would be great. Yeah,
no, we touched on it, but we have a direct sales team that go out there and talk direct to clients, to end user clients themselves. We will employ a number of different sort of marketing techniques in order to get the leads, and then the salespeople will follow up on that. We also have our partners who go out into their client bases. They tend to initiate the initial conversations, and then depending on which partner it is, either they'll take it all the way through, or they will bring the lead to our salespeople to take forwards. And on the consulting side, it tends to be more a relationship sale where the senior consulting directors will be working with the clients, building relationships, looking at the challenges that they have, and then presenting our approach to addressing those challenges.
That's great. Thank you again, Tom. Last pre-submitted question we have, and again, you have touched on this. How are you growing the SaaS out of a box offering, and what are the benefits to clients versus other products, and who is your competition here?
Yeah, so the SaaS out of the box offering, as Sean said, it's about getting it in front of a large number of smaller and medium-sized clients. We're going through our own pipeline and trying to identify those clients that we think it would be appropriate for. We're also doing digital marketing activity, which we've been doing over the last few months, which has been driving clients to the site, gives them the opportunity to sign up for the trial, and then from the trial, those that want to convert into paying customers can do so. And that's, as Sean explained, is very smooth and seamless now. So that's working well. And then obviously, as we've said a couple of times, we're talking to various partners who have large client bases or membership bodies who have large numbers of members about putting the SaaS out of the box offering into the hands of those members as a membership benefit that they then start to use, get used to, and then as they want to scale up or they want to use more features, they convert into paying customers.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. That concludes the pre-submitted questions. I know I haven't perhaps given you a great amount of time just to run through the questions you've had through, but if I could hand back to you and where appropriate to do so, if you could just read out the question and give your answer, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll do that now, and I'll just run through them. If I need to hand them over to any of the colleagues, I'll do so. The first one asks about the fact that Risiken has evolved as a product as we've been working with customers. To what extent do we see Risiken development as essentially being complete, or should we expect to see more initiatives and sub-products such as Risiken Pro? What I would say is that Risiken as a product is now a complete, solid, mature product as it is. So large clients can take that product, implement it, and it has all the features and capability that they would want. We will continue to evolve it. We have a development team on it. We are very responsive to client feedback. With this sort of product, you get constant client feedback and you need to evolve it. And in fact, our development approach is that we iterate every sort of 4 to 6 weeks. There'll be a new version 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. So it's a product that clients can see is continuously having features added to it. Some of them will be small things, and then occasionally there'll be something big. I think you'll see a lot more question sets as we move into different areas that companies want to ask the supply chain. We'll look at how Risiken can be implemented in different territories, different standards, different languages, etc. And there are 1 or 2 other interesting dimensions that we'll get to in order to start to look at the network effects of having a product like Risiken. When you get into the hundreds, if not thousands, of clients using it, then you have some interesting opportunities about how clients can leverage it to their benefit more widely. So it's a complete product today, but it will continue to evolve. There's a question about what are we normally paying our advisor fees, and perhaps a feeling that we have a very big group at the top. That's really important to us to have those people on board. Professor Nick Jennings, the former National Security Advisor for the UK and Vice Provost at Imperial College, General Sir Nick Houghton, former Chief of Defence Staff, Una May O'Reilly at MIT. These are serious, credible people that bring a lot to the party. We don't actually have a big bill on that side. We are really quite modest in what we pay both our advisors and our board. And if you were to compare what we pay our board versus a lot of other companies out there, you'd find that we're very modest in what we're paying there. But it is important to us to build those networks and get that expertise. Another question is about as a company that we talk about being an IP generating company, and yet you could look at us and say we have a consulting operation with a small product business on the side. That's a very good question and a good opportunity to be very clear about that. We are building an IP-driven recurring revenue business. And I've built businesses like this in the past. And the way that they work is that in the early days, when you're working on the product, getting it right in the market, the revenue from the product side tends to be low, and then it tends to start to hockey stick as you really get in amongst the client base and as you've refined the product. And whereas on the consulting side, you can quite quickly start to build a solid consulting business and then just see that grow steadily. So in the early days of a business like this, if you've got both consulting and intellectual property, you will almost always see a higher level of consulting, a lower level of IP, particularly if the IP product strategy is to look for recurring revenue. If you're looking for one-off chunky license fees, then you see big spikes of IP revenue, and it looks like you've got chunky IP revenue. But we are specifically looking for recurring revenue that builds up over time. That's where we see the value being. So that's why you see the shape of the business as it is today. We are really confident that Risiken now, the product where it is now, and our routes to market are telling us that that product is very much at the stage where it will start to accelerate over the coming year. And I think if you watch what happens to us and what happens to that product over the coming year, you'll definitely see that in my view. There's a question about steganography. I know I'm going a bit quickly, I'm just conscious of time, but about steganography and that we're doing some development in that area. We aren't actively doing development in that area. We have been talking in the past to academics working in that area. The question goes on to say, hasn't this only been around for 20 years and only used by criminals? Actually, that's not actually the case. Well, it has been around for 20 years. In fact, it's been around longer than that. The intelligence agencies and so forth have been using steganography in one form or another for almost as long as there have been agencies, and everyone continues to do so. It's just that the academics, the researchers, have found really interesting new ways of using steganography. There is always, in this cybersecurity area, it's an area where it's just never done. It almost doesn't matter whether something was being done 10 or 20 years ago. New researchers will come up with new ways of doing it. And what we need to look at is, are those new ways for doing it commercially compelling to customers today? And if so, should we get our hands on them? As it happens at the moment, we're not doing active work on the steganography side, but that's just the context there. There's a question about, do third parties actually tell the truth when asked about their cybersecurity? So if people are using Risiken to ask third parties about cybersecurity, are they telling the truth? On the whole, yes, third parties will tell the truth. I mean, it is a big deal if you are a third party and you are answering a questionnaire from one of your clients, and your client has asked you specific questions about cybersecurity, and you don't tell the truth on that. If that comes out, you're in a lot of trouble. So on the whole, third parties will tell the truth. Companies know how much to ask. You can't ask your suppliers every little detail about their cybersecurity posture, because that may expose them in some way. So you have to ask the right questions. And if anything, the challenge has been that companies have not necessarily been asking the right questions in a consistent way over and over again, in a way that is secure and scalable and methodical. And that's what Risiken allows them to do easily and overnight. Overnight, a company that's been really quite ad hoc in the way that it's asking questions can go to a very systematic way of asking a solid set of cybersecurity questions in a way that will get answers back. There's a question about how much competition does Nixa have, and do we believe that CROSSWORD's relative small size deters larger clients from committing to Nixa? And I would say the same applies to Risiken as well. To the second bit of that question, I would say not really at the moment. It could have done a little while ago, but now we're finding that we are a credible enough company to be out there pitching to large clients. We have FTSE 250 clients, we have global leaders in some sectors, we are bidding for multi-million pound, multi-year deals, and big organizations are looking at us. And in fact, to some extent, it goes back to the advisor point and the board point. They are looking at us and seeing a solid, credible company that they can do business with. There are a lot of cybersecurity companies in the UK. There are probably over 200 small cybersecurity companies with interesting bits of technology one way or another. There are a lot fewer that get to our sort of scale and are intending to grow beyond that. And therefore, larger clients look to people like us. In fact, we've won business against some of the really big consultancies that are out there, because clients are starting to say, actually, I can get a big four level of service and quality of service at lower prices and just the same quality from a firm like CROSSWORD, and in fact from CROSSWORD, that I'm getting from my current provider. So that's not proving to be a barrier. There is competition for Nixa out there, and we will have to fight against that competition. I'm never really worried about there being sort of 2, 3, 4, 5 other products in the same category that I'm in. If I'm going into a market where it's just either flooded with similar products or there's one dominant player that just owns the market, then I would stay out of that. But if there's 2 or 3 or 4 other products, there's a product in that product category, then that's okay from a competitive point of view. And that's where we feel we are with Nixa. So I've come to the end of the questions, Paul. I don't know if you want...
I was going to say, you've been very generous, and thank you very much for answering all of those questions. And of course, the company will review any further questions submitted by investors today, and we'll publish those answers on the Investor Meet Company platform. Again, just very conscious of time, and we're pretty much perfectly on the hour. Tom, I don't know if you've just got a few final words just to wrap up before I direct investors for feedback, please.
Just to say, we feel we are at a very good point. Risican is really ready to fly now. It's a very solid product, Risican Pro. We've figured out the sales model, and we're going to be pushing our foot on the gas. And consulting is growing strongly with a lot of good recurring revenue. So I think the rest of 2020 will be solid for us, and 2021 will be a really exciting year for CROSSWORD.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the CROSSWORD team for updating investors today. Could I ask investors not to close the session, as you will be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback. If you've accessed this meeting from our website, just a few seconds after the webinar finishes, the feedback page will appear in front of you. If you've accessed via the link in the email, you'll be asked just to log back in to submit that feedback. But please do, it's very welcome by the company. On behalf of CROSSWORD CYBERSECURITY PLC and Investor Meet Company, thank you very much for attending today's session. That concludes today's presentation.